All right, good people, welcome back as we continue our studies of the modes. And I know this material might sound a little dry, but believe me, just power through it, get it down, and you will be so thankful because once you learn this and apply it, it's going to open up all kinds of doors to your playing, and it's going to blow the roof off the place, so to speak. Okay, so let's look at each mode and talk a little bit about when to start using it, because now we're getting into applying these modes on the guitar. And the mode, you could tell by its structure or how it's put together, its intervals, how that relates to certain chords and what's going to sound good, okay? What I have up here on the board is I divided our modes, remember 7 modes of the major scale, into the more major sounding ones and the minor sounding ones. And you have this memorized, or you should. The first mode being Ionian, which is major. The 4th mode is Lydian, which is a major mode. The 5th mode is Mixolydian, which is a major mode. Then you have our more minor modes, like the 2nd mode is Dorian, more minor. 3rd, Phrygian, more minor. 6th, Aeolian, which is the natural minor or relative minor. Very minor. The most minor. Incredibly minor. 7th mode, Locrian, which is a very dissonant minor mode. Phrygian is very exotic sounding. Okay. Now, so let's just briefly look at the modes. Remember, all the modes are just variations of the major scale. I keep saying that because it's not very intimidating if you look at the modes that way. If you know your major scales, you know the modes of the major scale. Ionian, or your major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the interval structure of your major scales, of any major scale. Okay? And that sounds good over if you have like a major progression, not very, just very major sounding, or a power ballad that's in major key. Real major sounding, you might want to blow some of your full major scales over that. Not like in like a rock and blues context if it's a little bit more shuffly or not as major sounding. You have to be careful, so you have to use discretion. Sometimes full major scales can sound a little stiff, so you have to be careful with it. If you notice, these 2 major modes, the Lydian and the Mixolydian, are very similar to the major scale, except each one has just one different note. The Lydian has a sharp 4. All the other notes are the same. 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, and 7. And the Mixolydian, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. So they all pretty much, both of them are very similar to the major scale, except there's only one note difference. But that difference you really want to exploit and use it to your advantage. For instance, if you notice, Mixolydian has a flat 7th to it. So Mixolydian is the mode of choice when you're playing over 7th, or like a 9th chord or 9th chords, dominant chords, because those chords have a flat 7 in them. So that's why they sound so good. So anytime I have a progression or a song with like an A 7th chord in it, I'm using a lot of times that Mixolydian, A Mixolydian, over that chord, because of the flat 7th sounds really good. Whereas if you play a full major scale over a 7th chord, it's not going to sound good because it has a major 7th. And the major 7th over the flat 7th, That's why full major scales sometimes can, because of that 7th, can get you into trouble. If you're not sure, use major pentatonic, because major pentatonic is 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. It totally leaves out the 7th. Okay. The Lydian scale, the Lydian mode, 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7. I like the Lydian mode over major 7th chords. Not 7th chords. Major 7th, because it has a major 7th in them, because I like the sound of the sharp 4 over the just your natural 4th. It just sounds like a much more hipper note. Now you could play major scales over major 7th chords, and we'll do that in one of the jams, and it'll sound okay, but I prefer playing the Lydian mode. It just gives you that little bit hipper sound because we start going outside a little bit of the major scale and grabbing some hipper tones. So when I see major 7th chords lots of times, I'm thinking Lydian mode. When I see 7th, dominant 7th, 9th chords with flat 7 in them, major chords, I'm thinking Mixolydian. Okay? Now let's turn to the minor modes. Especially if you're more of a rock, bluesy, funk, alternative type player, you're going to be using these a lot, especially Dorian and Aeolian. Okay? The Dorian mode and the Aeolian mode are very similar modes. The only difference is this note right here, the 6th, and we're going to cover this in a module coming. Aeolian has a flat sixth, Dorian has a major sixth. That's the only difference. The rest of them are exactly the same. They both have a 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, and flat 7. Okay? So both modes work over minor chords. If you have a minor seventh, a minor chord, a minor 9, you could use the Dorian or the Aeolian. You could even use the Phrygian if you want an exotic sound. But these two work over the minor chords. Definitely. But if you want to play the mode over the whole progression, if it's in minor key, then you have to look if the 4 chord is minor or the 4 chord is major or the 2 is minor, and that will direct you to Dorian. And I have a whole module on the rules of soloing in minor key you're going to have to watch after this, and that'll nail that down. But just remember, the Dorian minor mode sounds great. So if you have a minor progression, you want to start thinking about maybe using Dorian or Aeolian, either over all the chords or possibly over the minor chords individually. They sound really, really good. So those are great modes to use over minor chords. And I use Dorian and Aeolian a lot. And you're going to see me playing with them a lot over our jam tracks. Okay? Phrygian, I especially like in a progression. The Phrygian mode is the same as Aeolian, except it has a flat 2. That's the difference. It has a flatted second. So anytime I have a progression and I see a flat 2 come up chord, I immediately go to Phrygian because that's signature Phrygian. One of the jam tracks we have is an A minor 7th to a B flat, major 7 flat 5. A to flat, 1 to flat 2. So as soon as you see that flat 2, I immediately think Phrygian. And Phrygian has a real nice exotic sound because of these flats combined with the flat 2. And I emphasize that 1 to the flat 2. So flat 2, even if it's a major progression, like if it goes A, B flat, right, maybe to B, to G to A. As soon as you see a flat 2 chord, boom, think Phrygian mode. And in a lot of metal, Phrygian sounds really good too because it's very exotic sounding. So you get a lot of Phrygian stuff going on. It sounds great. Okay, Locrian mode is the same as Phrygian, except it has a flat 5. So this is the most dominant of all modes because look at all these flats. Not the most dominant, the most dissonant. It has a flat 2, a flat 3, a flat 5, a flat 6, and a flat 7. So it has lots and lots of flats in it. So you really don't use it a lot in like rock or blues or alternative per se because it's so dissonant. It's a very good mode to use in jazz, and it's a really nice mode to use over the 7 chord in any major key, which is well, that's if I draw it out in the key of C. But the chord would be like a minor 7, flat 5. Half diminished chord. That chord is the 7 chord in any major key, the 3-note chord. And the Locrian mode sounds really nice over that because it has that dissonance to it. Okay? But I don't find myself using this a lot in a rock and blues context. Sometimes you could write some cool riffs with it, and that's what Metallica did with a couple of their songs. They used that Locrian mode. So think of your modes separate like this. And I know a lot of times these scales, because I'm showing you how they're all variations of the major scale, variations of the major start to look a lot alike. Keep them separate. Don't think, if you're thinking A Dorian, think A Dorian. Not necessarily G major. Play the G major scales, but think about the A note because that's you're shifting and emphasizing to the root of the mode. So memorize your interval structure. Memorize which are minor, which are major. Obviously, minor progressions and minor chords, you're going to be looking at your minor modes. Major progressions, major chords, you're going to be looking at your 3 major modes. Keep this divided. Dorian, you could use sometimes over both, and I'm going to show you an example of that when we start jamming, where if you have a 1-4 or a 1-4-5 major key, blues, shuffle, swing, anything like that, and I talk about this a lot in modules, Dorian works nicely. Anywhere basically you're using minor pent and major pentatonic together. Because when you use minor and major pent together, see Dorian has the major 2nd and the major 6th, which is from the major scale, but it also has the flat 3 and the flat 7 from the minor scale. So it kind of combines elements of both. Because these two flatted or minor notes are so strong, it's more of a minor feel. But I use Dorian a lot over 1-4-5s in major key, blues, shuffle, swings. Dorian sounds great because it combines elements of minor and major together. So you could use your discretion and get real creative. It's the other thing that's great about these modes. Get creative with them and use your discretion and have fun. Okay? So get this all down. and we're going to start applying it over jam tracks. I'm going to show you how to start putting it on the guitar, and you're just going to be playing major scales over all these, whether it's a minor progression, major progression, getting all these different moods and tones, and it's going to blow the fretboard wide open for you. Okay? We'll see you in the next module. Rock on, good people.